international competitive bidding and local or national competitive bidding. This international competitive bidding is a bidding that's open to the whole world. Anybody with capacity and adequacy of finance and whatever can bid anywhere in the world for certain threshold of projects. So for you to take part in that, for you to do that, if your project is such that you require international competitive bidding, you must then do some things. You must advertise in 2 local newspapers. You must advertise in the international journal for doing business, like development business, as it were, published by, I think, ADB those days. You must advertise in DPP's websites and websites of the procurement entity, and on and on. You must give for 5 days notice, pretender notice, as it were. And then if it is national bidding, advertise on the notice board of the country, of the procurement entity, select 2 national newspapers, advertise therein too, advertise in tender journal, and provide 30 days, as it were. And the question was that each time those projects were thrown up to international competitive bidding, Nigerians lost. Oh yes. I took part in one. And what I did as a QS, I said to myself, this project, we must win it. They threw it up internationally. I said, we must win it. What did I do? I disaggregated the cost of the construction into labor, material, plant, prime costs. Only a QS can do that. I hope you know. I disaggregated it. Labor, plant, materials. So at our board meeting, we now said, okay, since these are the costs of the prime constituents of the contract, what do we add as profit? We said, for us to get this job, let's add 10%. We added 10% profit. And we are so sure we're going to get the job. We're going to turn the lowest tender. Only for the tenders report to come out, and one company from the Southeast Asia, I won't mention the name, the company's country, came lower than us. We said, how are they able to do it? How was it done? Our investigation discovered that they beat us at the area of labor. Clearly. So I asked, did they import laborers from the moon? We discovered that they imported prisoners from their country, whom they pay nothing. They feed them in Nigeria. They pay them nothing. They are happy to be out of prison. And they were the labor they used. And they won the job and we lost. Meanwhile, I'm paying salaries, I'm paying staff, I'm paying Nigerians. I couldn't win anything. I think complaints like this went up. And government decided on what they call preference margin. Preference margin. To encourage Nigerian companies. Preference margin or margin of preference. To encourage Nigerian companies. And what they did was this. Any job that is up to ICB, job of 1 billion and above, is ICB. When every tender has been analyzed, they will get the lowest evaluated tender from those offshore companies. Put it aside. Get the lowest evaluated tender from domestic companies, Nigerian companies. Put it aside. And then they will add 7.5% to the lowest cost of the offshore company. In other words, if he bidded 100 million, they will add 7.5 million to his cost. So his cost will be 107 million, 107.5 million. So when they now compare it to the Nigerian contractor, if he's still lower than the Nigerian contractor, he will get it. But if by that adjustment, the Nigerian company comes lower, they'll give it to him. They call it margin of preference. All they are doing is to help us build domestic capacity. So it is there, 7.5%. If it's international competitive bidding. Yes. So we have all these things that are itemized there. Well, reasons why bids can be rejected. They have very dominating reasons and small reasons. They're all there. Then you have special and restricted procurement methods. In other words, they have ICB and NCB. But there are circumstances that they will use what they call special restricted methods to organize tenders. In that place, number one method is what they call a two-stage tendering process. That tendering process involves, first of all, asking the tenderers or the bidders to tender based on technical specifications first. They will compare technical specifications. Then the selected people whose tender were proficient or responsive will now be asked to join their financial proposal with that. And then the person who has the lowest responsive bid will get it. That has been how that system works. So we have restricted tendering where the source of the work is limited. Not everybody has expertise. So you just select a few people with that kind of expertise and then ask them to tender. You have what they call request for quotation. When the work is so small. And organizing a tender will be more expensive. So you do request for quotation. And that one says you must invite at least 3 people, 3 contractors or consultants, if it's consulting service, to bid. And the person who has the lowest available bid will get it. And all these things are very correct on paper. But the experience is not just like that. On a project I was involved in many years ago, I was invited to tender because they said that the ones I did before for the company, for the government, that we did it well. So they said, okay, we're inviting you again to bid. It's a small work, not the one that we're going to expose to international competitive bid or even national competitive bid. It's a small work. So please bid. I asked the question, what are the criteria for bidding? They said 3 companies are going to bid. I said, okay, fine. I began to prepare my bid. Halfway, I got a phone call that says, you know, we want you to get this job. So give us 3 names. All coming from you. But the one you want to use to get the job, make the price lower. And the other 2, high. So as to help us make sure you get the job. Something rang in my head. That thing was saying fraud, 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 fraud. I said, this is fraud. I called them, I said, no. I won't be able to do it. They said, why? That's how it is done. I said, I won't be able to do it. If you want me to put my bid, I'll put my bid. But for me to get to other companies and add, no, that's fraud. I won't do it. Some person, a top architect in front of me said, Oga, are you not in Nigeria? Don't you pay school fees? I said, I pay school fees, but what do I do? They said, we'll give you 1 hour to decide. If you don't decide, after 1 hour, we'll call you back. If you are still standing foolishly where you are standing, that's the end of it. After 1 hour, they called. You said, Mr. Naga, are you still standing where you're standing? I said, yes, sir. He said, do you want to give somebody else? I said, if you think that's the best. The phone went bang. You know, I brought out the letter they wrote to me initially and I cancelled it. Signed my name across it. See, this one is gone. But the next day, they called me. They said, please give us your own bid. Your own quote now. I gave them my quote. I think they got quotes from other places. I don't know how. But the bottom line is that I won the job. Now, you see, the battle we fight for equity and transparency can be costly. And those of you who are interested in federal government jobs, are you willing to fight that battle? That is the issue. So you have all these systems of what was provided for procuring and disposing of properties. I'm rushing through them because you need to read them. It's not what I will read here. You have the packages, so you have to read them. And then you have these other things. How to procure consultants. How to dispose public property. Especially with respect to estates, buildings, and so on and so forth. Then you have code of conduct how people who participate in procurement must behave. There's a provision that says you cannot be a partaker of the preparation of the package for bidding and still take part in the bidding. We bid there for a job as consultants. An entity called for the day of opening of tender. You see, these things you see people bringing cartons of documentation. Some went abroad and prepared their own cartons, their own documentation, so excellent. And they paid some huge money to do it. That day they brought the whole thing. And they were just calling people. Only for us to discover that the consultant who designed the facility himself also bid it. Also bid it. And the entity accepted his bid. In other words, making it clear that he has been the person pre-chosen, as it were. Within the objection, we say no, it cannot happen. Thank God the bid was truncated. BPP said no, it cannot happen. I can tell you something. If you don't do something, if you don't draw attention to certain irregularities, they can fly. Everybody must be in this business of trying to make things work. So there must be a code of conduct that must be enforced, even as we are into procurement now, as it were. Now there's a provision for what they call administrative review. If you feel that what they did at that BPP or at the MDAs was not right, before this time you can't protest. You can only write a letter, and then if they like you, they can say some other things to you. If they don't like you, they will just drop a letter. But the BPP now came out with a regulation, a 9-step regulation, that makes it possible for a contractor or a consultant who felt cheated to appeal. And those 9 steps, they have to follow them. First of all, writing to the entity itself, complaining, and copying BPP. And the thing will flow down, until finally, if BPP gives their own decision, and you don't like it, you can go to court. But the only court you can go to is the Federal High Court. And whatever decision Federal High Court gives on that job, on that appeal, is the final. So for PPA, Federal High Court is the highest court of jurisdiction. Not Court of Appeal, not Supreme Court. Federal High Court. And why this thing is important is that you must know the limit of your power before you engage in bidding, so that you don't begin to exercise what will not fly at all, as it were. Then there's a provision for sanctions for breach. If a man, a person, a natural contractor, a natural person who is a contractor, if you breach it, if a company breaches it, the years imprisonment will go to. All those offenses created, bid splitting, bid rigging, all those kind of things. If you are caught and proved to be guilty, that's the question. If you are caught and proved to be guilty, then there are certain sanctions that are there. If it's a company, that company is debarred from bidding for 5 years. And every director in that company goes to jail for 3 years without fine. If it's staff, they will sack you and you will still go to jail, as it were. So that is the architecture of the act. That is the architecture of the act. Then I want to do a small overview of the general conditions of contracts, equivalent to our own FIDIC, the FIDIC we just discussed in the morning. The GCC, developed by BPP, supported by the World Bank. I gave you just the outline of the GCC. GCC means General Conditions of Contract. Within that package, there is also Special Conditions of Contract, just like you saw under FIDIC. General Condition of Contract has Standard Condition of Contract and has the section for Special Conditions of Contract, as it were. So we have it the same way in our GCC. GCC has 41 clauses under Section A. And let me put it out this way. Normally, when I want to master a document, when we were in school, and we were told to master JCT those days, 35 clauses. We started by mastering, memorizing the clauses themselves, the clause headings. Then we went to the clause itself. And by the time we finished 4 years of school, everything in JCT is in our mind. So if they call section 1 or clause 1, you know what it is. Clause 25, you know what it is. Clause 30, you know what it is. And so on and so forth. So when I want to have an overview of a form, I organize them in the sections. Yeah. When I master a section, it becomes easy for me to master the thing themselves, as it were. And let me tell you something. The QS is the only person. Somebody came to me, a front-end engineer came to me. He said, do you know that anybody outside the QS models through contract laws? Only the QS is trained to interpret those laws. He said, we, engineers, we model through. Nobody trains us. He now said to me, when are you going to write a construction book that explains these clauses? I said, that's a matter for another day. But Surveyors here, we have opportunity of doing stuff, and we are not doing it. I was telling the president, I've said it before. I said, the person who taught Nigerian lawyers how to do arbitration was the QS. Mr. Mururu, dead now, from Kenya. He was posted from London to come and do the first training of the Chartered Institute of Arbitration in Nigeria. And when I met him in Kenya, the first question he asked me was, why we are not even a single QS at that training program, and there were 4,000 lawyers. Not one QS. When you ask a quant surveyor to come and do training on arbitration, he will ask you how much. Anything more than 30,000 naira, he's not interested. Go and tell lawyers. If it's 200,000 naira, they'll pay. You know why? They know the value of that stuff. They know it. I'm saying this so we don't allow other people to come and carry naturally what should belong to us. So let's go and master this. Section A is called general section. That's 41 clauses. And what those clauses are. Please read them. From definition to contract document to corrupt, fraudulent, obstructive practices, interpretation, all kinds of things like that, they come under Section A. 41 clauses. Section B is titled time control. 8 clauses. From clause 42 to clause 49. It covers time for completion of the works, program of works, early warning, extension of time, acceleration, delays, order by the engineer, and management meetings. That's Section B. Section C is titled quality control. So have in mind, general, time control, quality control, then cost control. If you mark them that way, they become easy for you to memorize and understand and navigate. So we have time control. Section C is titled quality control. 7 clauses from clause 50 to clause 56, talking about the obligations of the contractor, of the employer, and so on and so forth. Then you find Section D, titled cost control. It contains 17 clauses, clause 57 to 73, covering bills of quantities, changes in quantities, adjustments, payment, all those kind of things, they're all there. Then Section E, 4 clauses, completion of the contract. Talks about completion, taking over, final account, as-built drawings and manuals, and so on and so forth. And Section F, just 4 clauses too, or 5 clauses. Termination and settlement of disputes. And let me tell you something. There's a reason why they arranged those clauses that way. Every clause in GCC and its cousin, the SCC, right, allocates a risk, allocates an obligation, tells who ought to do what, and what will happen if you don't do it. The only clause that does not allocate any risk or obligation is the clause on dispute settlement. That's why it's called the independent clause in the contract. And therefore, even if every other clause is annulled by one thing or the other, that one on dispute resolution stands alone. There's no allocation of risk. It just tells you what happens if there's a quarrel. And for me, as an ADR person, that is the most important what? Clause. Because when push comes to shove, as it must happen, that's where the issue is. So, it's arranged in such a way that you know that everything that has started from clause 1 up to this clause, anything, any dispute, any claim, any whatever it is this one that will decide how it will be resolved. That's it. And sometimes, let me tell you something. I'm telling you something now that is technical. In very many contracts that provide for arbitration, the clause will normally say if there's a disagreement or dispute or anything, and the parties couldn't agree, and the amicable settlement fails, you refer the thing to arbitration of a tribunal either selected by you or by an independent third party. And people have come to ask me, if I did work and they are owing me, can I go to arbitration? And I said to them, arbitration clause makes it very clear you cannot go to arbitration except there's a dispute or disagreement. If you did work as a contractor for 10 naira and the client says, yes, I'm owing you 10 naira, is there a dispute? Huh? There's no dispute. You cannot go to arbitration. You can only go to court for debt, owing and outstanding and get your money paid. But if you want to take advantage of arbitration, you must then create a dispute. Oh yes. Oh yes. You must create one. Yes. I was doing a project and we finished the project. As a contractor, and we finished the project. And the client or the employer refused to pay the balance of retention. And I waited for her to pay. She didn't pay. I wrote to her asking her to pay. She refused to pay. I computed interests. I wrote to her again, adding the interest. She now replied and said, this interest I will not pay it. Hello? Dispute. I went to arbitration. Now, I want to make it clear that GCC did not provide for nominated subcontractor. You know why? Because the Act itself didn't provide for nominated subcontractor. If you read section 16 of the Act, subsection 25, its interpretation implied that you can't have on a project under this form a nominated subcontractor. It means every contractor is domestic to remain contractor. The client is looking for one point of responsibility. Of course, you know that if in other ones you have warranties and all those kind of things that you have to annex together. But in this one, there is no provision for subcontractor. And the provision for settlement is number 1, amicable settlement, clause 2.1. Number 2, adjudication. If it fails, clause 2.2. And then finally, arbitration. In this one. In FIDIC, it's like the reverse. You do adjudication first, then amicable settlement, then arbitration. Here is arbitration first, amicable settlement first. If it fails, adjudication, then arbitration. Gentlemen, I'm going to quickly run through this because I felt that I needed to navigate the architecture so that you can understand where we're coming from. Now, matters arising. I have general matters and I have specific matters. General matters has to do with what I call, I said, the Act remains a comprehensive piece of legislation that accords with the best practices anywhere in the world. Nigeria had, in many instances, adapted and demonstrated world-class legislation in tackling several governance issues, but had always failed at the altar of implementation. And I say PPA is not an exception. Within the last 5 years, from towards the tail end of Jonathan's time, up to now, results have been very mixed. You have in the BPP people who are messianic, who are intending that this thing must work. And you have people in the ministries, department agencies, who are what they call, obviously they call them resistant, what? Reform Resistance Army. RRA. They will do everything to circumvent the Act. And from our own experience, despite every effort being made by BPP to train personnel, monitor all these projects, save us money, as it were, we've not been able to do more than 45% of a given capital budget implementation in a given year. And it's all because of this reform resistance army. What they will normally do is that they will tell you that the long lines of timelines required, these 2 weeks here, 1 month here, is too much. And they will delay packaging and planning their procurement until towards the end of the year. When they will now begin to say it is important, we can't return money to the treasury, and they will boost so many things together, and then just to make sure that you don't return money to the treasury, you do what? You now quickly approve what they want. And so what we wanted to avoid is still happening one way or the other. There was a place I was talking. I said, please, is it not possible for us to sanction those accounting officers? If they give you a budget to implement, capital budget in the given year, and you are not able to do it, and you can't show the reason why you didn't do it, why don't we sanction them? Yesterday in the newspapers, the Auditor General of Nigeria said that many MDAs, as of 2016, refused to submit the audit report. And so they are unaudited. Why are they refusing to do it? Somebody must be hiding something. And my challenge and question is this: what is the sanction provided by the law? Why are we not implementing them? Is a question for another day. Government tried its best in trying to find solutions to these things. You find the government, given what they anticipated was going to be problems, and their answer, lack of familiarity and understanding of extant laws, regulations, and guidelines of procurement, they say train the people. Accounting officers should make sure they hand over handbooks, relevant handbooks, train them, send them to training programs, and all those things. Delays in approval, there's an answer. Delays of processing payments, there's an answer. Challenges in documents, there's an answer. Government did everything possible. But I'm telling you that a reform resistance army still working in those places, making sure that these things are not working well. I was scandalized a few weeks ago when I was told there was a job we did many years ago, closed the file and ended. And there's someone in my office. They said, come to so and so Parasata. We went there. And they said, we had a query from the auditor's office or the general's office over this project that money was overpaid. We said, how? Look at the certificate. Compute it. They said, no, we don't understand the certificate. I said, look at the final account. So we don't understand final account. Look at the certificate. We don't understand it. And this is the head of procurement. It's permissible, it's possible that you don't understand. Why are there not competent people in that procurement department that can interpret these documents? Why? Why didn't they have a quant surveyor who can interpret final account? Why? They feed everyone with accountants. You want to do a constitutional audit, you go and bring an accountant. One of them was challenging, saying, okay, yes. What's the difference between schedule of finishes and window schedule? What's the difference? Is it me that will tell him? I said, my friend, go to school. Go and learn engineering or quant surveying. Then you can come and know the difference between schedule of finishes and schedule of... That's what we have there. I'm going to specific matters now. I'm going to round up very, very quickly. Specific matters. I just highlighted what was in the Act. The Act, what you saw there in bold letters, is just the way the Act has it. An Act to establish the National Council of Public Procurement and the Bureau of Public Procurement as the regulatory authorities responsible for the monitoring and oversight of public procurement, harmonizing existing government policies and practice by regulating certain standards and developing the legal framework and professional capacity for public procurement in Nigeria and for related matters. That's what you find there. I cited a case that is very popular in Nigeria, my second paragraph. I said it is now tried law as ably established by the Supreme Court in the case of the Minister Governor of Lagos State and others against Ojukwu and another in 1986 law report, where the Supreme Court said the Nigerian Constitution is founded on the rule of law, the primary meaning of which is that everything must be done according to the law, according to law. It means that government should be conducted within the framework of recognized rules and principles which restrict discretionary power. Obaseki, JSC. Having said that, I now began to look at the act itself. The implication within the context of this discourse is that the act should be administered in consonance with its provisions. Section 1.1 says, there is established the National Council of Public Procurement in this act, referred to as the council. And section 2 gave us the laws or the obligations, the functions of the act, of the council. I now made it clear, just like I said initially, that for 11 years now, there's no council. Up to today, there's no council. And when I asked a question, I said, why is there no council? BPE has the same architecture of law, the National Council of Privatization, and then the Bureau itself. Why is there no council? Why is it that every government that comes will say, we're going to put a council? When they come, there's no council. And they told me, the person talking to me put his voice inside the box and said to me, we are afraid of transferring power of awarding contracts to council. That we who are the owners of the contract will be sidelined. So every contract above a certain threshold must go to FEC, the owners of the contract, who are afraid of being sidelined. And I said, why don't you amend the act? Amend it and transfer power to award contract, even though I didn't see any power to award contract on the council. But amend it and say, no, you are the one that will, so that the law can run. And not provide opportunity for anybody to get up one day and challenge what has been done. And on the basis of technicality, you will rubbish everything, as it were, because you didn't comply with the law. Everything should be done in accordance with the law. Having said that, I said the act envisages or assumes the presence of well-informed and articulate professionals within the procurement department of each ministry. In other words, the procurement department is expected to have the capacity to transform ministerial policies into achievable concepts and well-developed terms of references for procurement of service providers. Unfortunately, this assumption in reality is unsupported. What am I saying? I'm saying that if you go to the average ministry today, under procurement department, people that will package policies, articulate policies, are hardly there. Despite all the trainings, it looks like people are just determined to make sure that the old system continues. But nobody runs 100 meters, I'm going to tell you, with his hand tied behind him. He will come last. So we must make sure that these things work. The BPP has released procurement guidelines, Procurement Regulation 2007, that stipulates what and what has to happen. And they said in those guidelines that every contract or project coming under the purview of the PPA must be done using GCC and the subsidiary provision on specific contracts, as it were. And so they issue standard bidding documents. What those bidding documents you have. And but it will surprise you that most ministries hardly use the bidding documents issued by BPP. Right, they would do everything possible to make sure that those contracts come under the threshold so they can use their own bespoke contracts. Oh yes. They can use their own bespoke contracts. I've seen it happen severally. And we are still challenging them. Now, there is one document, one project now, a dollar-denominated project in Nigeria. Even I worry them now, they are still prospecting, doing some things. And they were about to go to tender. And they were preparing tender documents. And the legal units of those MDAs who have refused to learn construction law still develop their own bespoke law, bespoke contract agreements. And the challenge is this. When you develop bespoke contract agreement, flouting the regulations issued by BPP, and still in that bespoke agreement, they will now put a clause that says the standard of this contract must be conducted according to international standards and must be done using a federal government standard condition of contract. Meanwhile, what that contract contains contradicts what the federal government GCC says. And the bottom line is challenge, problem. problem? And how can we go? So a challenge in that ministry, that department, was that the lawyer representing the Federal Ministry of Justice insisted that the standard conditions of contract issued by BPP should not be part of the bidding documents. And our question was this: what does the contractor need standard condition of contract for to bid? Did you hear that question? What does the contractor need standard condition of contract for to bid? That's the lawyer asking the question. What surveyors, do you have the answer? Huh? How can a contractor assess his risks and price accordingly without seeing the condition of contract? It is not condition that will tell him what the risks are, who is bearing which risk. And therefore he will price appropriately. So if a lawyer to make that kind of opposition, and not one lawyer across the board, which means they have no understanding of how a construction contract works, and yet they're the dominant players. We saw, sir, when we were talking about amending contracts, how risks can be allocated and reallocated. You carry a risk and transfer to somebody else. He doesn't know about it. He didn't price for it. When push comes to shove, it shows. So we're saying these are part of the challenges. People who should occupy that kind of place must be people who have gone for training. People like those, if there are lawyers here, you're working for government, people who came for this kind of training as lawyers, they're the kind of people that should go and man those procurement entities, those units, because they will give proper advice. But what is happening here, there now, is not that. Now, I have an issue. And I have an issue with definitions. GCC has some definitions. In clause 1(1)(b), GCC provides for bills of quantities. And it says that the price and completed bill of quantities forming part of the tender. And I say this is consistent with international best practice. There is no place in GCC where BEME was defined. What is BEME? Huh? Bill of Engineering Measurement and Evaluation. There is no place in GCC under the definition clause where BEME was defined. You find it in the regulations. And we know regulations are subsidiary to the main provision itself. Yes. The main provision defines bill of quantities. And if you could Google, any of you Google here, there is no other place in the world, the whole wide world, where they use BEME. No other place. It's the peculiar Nigerian contraption arranged to service corruption. You don't hear me? And engineers know it. They know it. Okay? You are my witness. Talking about Mr. Lufahai, Agele. I was at the National Policy Commission for Infrastructure. And our private sector chair was the president of NSC. As I introduced myself, he said, okay, you are from NIQS. I said, no, I'm here on my own. He said, let's see after this meeting. Let's see after this meeting. After the meeting we met, he said, Ifeanyi, this fight between engineers and surveyors about who should do what, we should end it. Let everybody do what is own, what he's trained to do. Why should we be putting our legs here, Can we meet? I said, no, I'm not the president of NIQSO. I'm just a member of this committee. He said, is that so? Who is the president? I said, Mr. Agele Alufahai. He said, give me his number. I gave him your number. And I think people met. So they know. They know. But because they have the ubiquity of numbers and influence, they can muzzle us. But you see, you can kill the truth. Bury it. After 3 days, the truth will rise. That's the truth. Clause 1B now talks about engineer. You know, we mentioned it here. I said engineer in GCC is an administrative function, not a technical function as such. So the engineer there can delegate his work to somebody who is competent to do it. That's how it is in other forms. But when you say an engineer in GCC must be somebody who is a member of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, then you are making a great mistake. And this thing has caused problem. There's a current project going on here in Lagos. Federal government agency owned. First of all, the agency went and designed a 7-story building for a site that takes only 3 stories. So they had a challenge of how to get approval. Right? They awarded the contract in 2011 without site. And finally gave the site to the contractor in 2014. Yes, without site. Gave site to the contractor 2014. The contractor applied to them to say, look, the price of 2011 and 2014 are not the same. I will apply for price variation because that was what they call a competition event in clause 64(1). I will apply. When he applied, the engineer said, listen to me. You are paid advance payment, were you not? He said, yes, I was paid. He said, the interest accrued from advance payment should be used to defray the cost of price increase. He's an architect trained in England. He was a RIBA certified architect. So use the interest. Since you have advance payment, you didn't use that time. You must have fixed it. Use the interest to defray the cost. The contractor came to us. I said, don't worry, let me write them a letter. I wrote them a letter. I said, clause 71 of GCC makes it clear that interest, that advance payment has no interest accrued on it. So what you're proposing is a monster. The matter died. The issue now became, the clause says the engineer shall approve whatever price there is to approve. The architect said, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an engineer. The only engineer in this job is a structural engineer and a services engineer. If I ask them to do it, it means they've taken over the leadership of the team from me. Huh? Since I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer. The thing says engineer. I'm not an engineer. And the engineers here, if I allow them, they will take over the leadership. Let me push the thing back to the client. You wrote the client a letter. I said the client, contractor has said that he needs revision. Please advise. And the employer called the consultant architect. He said, I appointed you to advise me. And you're not asking me to advise you. Simply because you need to understand that engineer here is generic. We're in trouble. You know, as I round up now, let me tell you a small story. One of the biggest bus company owners in Nigeria. I went to his office to transact some business. He was an Igbo illiterate, didn't go to school. So he hired a retired permanent secretary as his PA. He believed that this permanent secretary, who knows the government in and out, if I put him forward, he should be able to interface with me, with the government on my behalf, and then advise me on what to do. I entered into the office. The permanent secretary was there. And this man, an illiterate motor owner, is, in fact, if I mention his name, you know him. I won't mention his name. He was now asking the permanent secretary, say, this matter before us, can we do it this way? He suggested a way of doing it. The permanent secretary said, yes, if we do it that way, it is good. The man kept quiet. He now reversed the thing. He said, what if we do it this way? The Palm said, if we also do it that way, it's also correct. He said, can you excuse me? Can you excuse me? The Palm sec left. He turned to me and said, why am I paying him? I'm paying him to advise me. And he turned around to make me be, why am I paying him? If you are an architect here in this meeting, man, understand that engineer in that form includes you. It's a generic term. So the engineer is somebody who is named in the SCC as the one to supervise the project. Simple. You know, this delay of not understanding what the term is cost the client money, because as work was being delayed, interest in bank account, whew, bank loans. I'm ending now. I mentioned this matter somewhere. Clause 67(2) of GCC says, concerning retention, it says, let me even read it. On the completion of the whole works, pardon me, I'm illiterate in navigating these things. Okay. It says, on the completion of the whole of the works, half of the total amount retained shall be repaid to the contractor. The remaining half shall be repaid when the defective liability period has passed. And the engineer has certified that all defects notified by the engineer to the contractor before the end of the period has been corrected. By this stipulation, there's a clear provision for the repayment of 2.5%. Remember, point surveyors call it what? One moiety. It's only QSC that know that language. 2.5% is called one moiety. It's special to us. That one moiety of the retention upon practical completion of the whole work shall be paid, and the balance payable at the end of the first liability period. But most bespoke contracts I've seen, you know what they contain? They will say this contract shall be run or administered based on federal government standard form of contract. In other words, GCC. Clear? Then under it, you know, I said them say something like retention. The commission shall be entitled to retain 5% of the contract price at the completion of the construction work for 6 months as security against latent defects in the construction work occasioned by bad workmanship or negligence on the part of the contractor. In other words, a clause in that their bespoke contract will still say that retentions can only be paid after 6 months of practical completion. And a client came to me and I wrote a letter to the commission. I said, this is what the contract says. This contract must be run based on GCC. And GCC says end of practical completion, 2.5% is paid. End of the first liability period and correction of defects, 2.5% is paid. They said our template, our payment platform, computer platform, doesn't recognize one moiety or 2.5%. All it knows is 5% end of the first liability period. So when they threw it into it, the thing bounced back. And I said, your computer system must answer to GCC. You must retool it. It must answer to GCC. You cannot base on what you customize by yourself and then just act like that. It's not possible. You know what? Interest was mounting in the bank. And this matter went on for 4 years. And I was asking the man, the employer, please brief me to go after them for interest. He said, no, because if I go after them, they may not give me new work. And so the man lost millions because a clause that shouldn't be there was allowed to be there. What are the solutions? I'm going to run through now. What are the solutions? I said number one, there is the National Council on Public Procurement with a clear and unambiguous mandate should be consulted. That's number one. Number two, stiffer sanctions should be provided for non-compliance with the provisions of the Act and procurement regulations. Number three, capacity building efforts should be significantly escalated to create a crop of competent personnel able to plan and implement procurement in accordance with the true purpose of the Act. Number four, the legal units of MDAs should be staffed by lawyers with subject matter competence in procurement, especially in construction contract matters. Number five, accounting officers of MDAs should ensure strict compliance with project procurement timelines and project procurement regulations. Number six, I said both the PPA and GCC should be purged of all errors of inconsistent terms, imprecise definitions, typographical errors, and sub-references. You find in the document, one of the definitions says, this contract shall be run under the laws of the People's Republic of Nigeria. Is there? And you ask yourself, when did the Federal Republic of Nigeria become the People's Republic of Nigeria? It's all there. You can see in one sentence, they say bid documents, tender documents. Use the same bid, tender, all in one sentence. All kinds of inelegant drafting should be purged. Conclusion. I said the Public Procurement Act could well constitute a vehicle for public accountability and value for money in construction and building if its provisions are comprehensively implemented both in spirit and in letter. To achieve its full potentials requires the fullest buy-in at the highest level of executive power. The BPP must continue its current insistence that business